Okay, today I'm joined by Adam Woodhall, who's the CEO and founder of the General Counsel Sustainability Forum, which was formerly known as Lawyers for Net Zero. Adam has a lengthy sustainability CV and he won Legal Personality of the Year 2023. So, welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Hello there.
Okay, Adam, when, why, and how did you first get into sustainability?
Well, you could argue that it was in 1986, um, because that's when I was doing my craft and design O level, and at 15, and I had to choose what I would design and what I would create, and so I designed a wind turbine, only a very small one. So I can't, that's obviously a long time ago. I can't really remember that much what I was thinking about generally, but I definitely remember designing that. And also, I very fairly quickly realized that engineering wasn't going to be something I was going into because it never got off the page. Because I was basically a bit intimidated about how to take this design, which looked okay, into something that might kind of vaguely work. And the thing was at that time, I was also really interested in politics. So when I did my A levels, that's politics, history, economics, and then university, government, masters, international relations. And actually, the next kind of big sort of thing was that when I was in my undergraduate, I set up the Greenpeace Society. When did my postgraduate, I studied as part of my dissertation the reasons for the success of the Montreal Protocol, which bans CFCs, which is still by far the most successful global environmental policy. And now the thing is it took me a long time. I spent too long studying around that, but I did find out what were kind of all the reasons, and there's many reasons, but the core reason was that the big corporations, especially DuPont and then latterly ICI, realized they could make more money from the replacement chemicals than they could continue to produce CFCs. So actually, that then meant that DuPont in the sort of early mid 80s got behind the international negotiations and pushed them because they knew they could make much more profit out of the replacement chemicals. So that was great for my dissertation, that finding, but terrible for my motivation at the time because it proved my sort of early 20-something cynical belief that, like, there's nothing's going to happen. And I didn't feel as though I could do anything about it because I kind of thought about going off and, say, working for Friends of the Earth or something like that. This is in the early 90s. So actually, I then ended up having my personal sort of environmental wilderness years between sort of mid 90s to the mid noughts. But then actually in the mid noughts is when I kind of properly first got into sustainability as a job. Because in 2006, I set up an organization called People, Profit, Planet, which is focused on how individuals and teams and whole sort of groups can take environmental action at work. So it's employee environmental engagement, behavioral change. That started off really well because that was 2006-07. And then, of course, the crash came. And then it kind of, I did loads of great work with loads of great people, learned lots of things. And one of the key things that I learned was that actually it can be really easy to get attached to flogging a dead horse. So basically, I realized that behavioral change is actually a really difficult thing to do. You're somebody who probably knows that better than most. I think literally written a book on it.
Yeah.
And actually then eventually I realized that wasn't working, so I decided to get into kind of other things. But that's kind of like my foundation
Yeah.
that got me to going.
Yeah. Well, the thing that stuck out in your CV when I was looking through it was that you had a stint promoting sustainability through stand-up comedy. So sustainability isn't renowned for being a laugh a minute. So how did that start and where did it go?
Well, I think it was actually because I'd been struggling to get much like traction regarding kind of behavioral change on a kind of like employee basis. Now, the thing is that spoiler alert, the problem is it's just there's a technical term, it's bloody difficult. And it's not just it's if it's difficult to actually get it going in the first place, to keep maintaining is so difficult
Yeah.
for various reasons. And what it was is I'm kind of a curious sort of person, so I was like, right, okay, what's another way of trying to kind of get more engagement going?
Yeah.
And also because I was doing kind of lots of good work, as I say, working with some good clients, but it wasn't kind of growing in the way that I thought I could do. And the thing that kind of kept me a little bit sane was that I didn't see anybody else doing like really big things. There was a few players that were doing some good stuff like Global Action Plan, but nobody like massive. So then I thought, right, okay, I've got to try something different. And then I found out that there's this course called Sustainable Stand-Up.
Hmm.
I thought, I've got to give that a go because, like, I probably would have never have joined a stand-up course. There's loads of those. But I thought this would be interesting because it might be interesting people I'll get to meet. And then it just gives you an excuse. And then I thought, and actually, is there a way of actually rolling this into the sort of day job? And actually, what I found was kind of mainly no and a little bit yes is the answer. The mainly no is obviously it's not the sort of thing that you can typically make as a sort of you can't do gags and things like when you're doing it generally. But yes, in that actually in specific circumstances, you can do. So what my ambition was, I had sort of two ambitions when I first decided to do it. The first was to hopefully make people laugh. And actually, what was nice with what you did, like a 6-week course, you designed a kind of a 7 or 8 minute sketch, and you can find me. I am still on YouTube. If you type in "sustainable stand-up Adam Woodhall," you'll find my sketch. And yes, and the main thing is, they have evidence there are people laughing in my sketch to my jokes.
I'll
So that
put
was
the
great.
link below the
Great,
episode
yes.
if I can find it.
So then, and then the thing was, I was curious about is, can I get paid to do sustainable stand-up?
Mhm.
And then first thing I did was actually I did another kind of warm-up gig after that, but then actually I got to speak at a kind of a sectoral conference. I won't actually name it because I'm going to name something about the CEO of that particular sector. Because what actually happened was that in my routine, I basically it's more kind of like a commentary. It's kind of like, it's both comedic, but it's not a laugh out loud. It's
Yeah.
just warning anybody that's going to go and watch it. And then what I did was actually recognize that in my routine, there was actually, I create this kind of fictitious conversation between me and a kind of effectively a stooge, a character who effectively stays silent in that. I'm just talking. So I thought I was like, right, I'm doing this fantastic event. I've been invited to go and be the kind of warm up for the annual dinner of it. And the guy who invited me is the CEO. So I'll get him to be the walk on wearing the costume, which if you watch the video, you'll understand which kind of very famous, the most famous fictional anti-hero possible, if that helps anybody. And he walked on, he was meant to walk on. And at the moment that he was meant to walk on, he didn't. And at that time, I was already dying on stage. Nobody was laughing. Like everybody was like, "What the hell's going on?" Because it wasn't actually obviously a comedy routine. So then, actually, my main finding was never work with animals, children, or CEOs. It's like, so and then unfortunately, I had a few other sort of a couple of other sort of sessions where it didn't go as well. But then finally, I did do an event, ironically, at a law firm. On World Environment Day, where basically I learned a lot of lessons as to why it didn't work this time that I've just mentioned. And I did get laughs out of them, and I did get paid to do comedy. So, and the key thing that I learned was that actually that's not the way that you're going to go about creating change particularly, but it was fun.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to ask you. Would you go back to it? Sounds like the answer is no.
Well, the interesting thing is that actually what I recognized was that actually it's quite fun. It's creative. You kind of like, you get into the edge of your comfort zone, etc. It's good. And if what I did is I got to the level where I could get some people laughing, and to be able to get to the thing where you kind of like being able to gig regularly and get most crowds laughing. Actually, you needed to do it like you needed to commit to it. I needed to be going out and doing a gig every once or
Yeah.
twice a week even. And I was like, yeah, I've got other interests. So I was like, right, I've now got my little thing. I'll put it on the shelf in my kind of imaginary kind of like, life case. And then like that can sit there.
Yes. Sounds like my music career. I did one good gig once, and that was enough. I just stopped. Okay. So then from comedy to the law, where did the legal angle come into your career then?
Yes, well, there was a kind of like bridge period, which was in that bridge period is that after starting to realize that the behavioral change work is actually really tough to deliver, then I pivoted to working with sustainable startups. I kind of presented myself and did quite a lot of interesting work as a kind of strategic storyteller for like clean tech and renewable and etc. And that was great. I was really enjoying it. And what I realized was even though that could lead to some big sort of changes, maybe long term, because they're startups or even scale ups, the likelihood that they're going to make an impact is like going to be way in the future, and we need change now.
Yeah.
So then what I realized was this was around about 2020 that what the need was to focus on who are the people with real influence and how do you engage them to kind of like help drive the changes we need. And then, for example, some of those clean technologies will be kind of like the purchase more, et cetera, et cetera. But you need that kind of like that's the pull. You need the pull side of it, the audience that. And so because I'd actually the thing that I'd really got from kind of as I kind of said flogging my own personal dead horse of the work I was doing on behavioral change in the end was actually I realized how much you can get close to things and not iterate it and pivot quick. So I was like, right, okay, so I'm going to learn that. And then also I kind of learned, I've been doing quite a lot of good work, hopefully, certainly that was the feedback I was getting from working with the startups. So I thought, what sector can I focus on that would be interesting and can be influential?
Mm-hmm.
And what it was is because there's some there's quite a lot of organizations that would say work with procurement. Like I think one of your previous podcast guests, he runs the sustainability supply chain sustainability school, which is fantastic. There's people who you might have had people from marketing. And there's quite a few advertising and marketing bodies doing this. There's also ones in the accountancy industry. And what it was kind of through some strategic thinking, also just some serendipity for various reasons, realized that the legal sector didn't have virtually anything really focused on it in 2020.
Yeah.
And then what I did was I started really researching and talking to lawyers about what the opportunity was because I was actually working with somebody. And I was actually trying to set up somebody else's idea, basically, which was focused on private practice law firm lawyers.
Mhm.
And then what actually I found was actually the opportunity is actually in-house. So that's the general counsel, that's the name for the basically the sometimes they're called the chief legal officer, which is a bit more descriptive. But as I'll come to later, actually, general counsel is actually a very good term in many ways. And so by the end of 2020, I'd started to realize that actually it was this in-house area that needed to be focused on. And then also one of the advantages as well of the pain that I'd gone through in not iterating fast enough regarding the behavioral change was that because it wasn't working that well with the people that I was working with previously, I was like, right, I'm going to give it a go and I'm going to try my own thing here. And that's what led me to kind of like set up what was then called Lawyers for Net Zero.
Yeah. So lawyers, not the natural, you mentioned procurement officers, and you would have, chief operating officers and maybe chief finance officers. So it's not immediately obvious to me what the role of the lawyer in hitting net zero is.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's two reasons why this is actually. Is that number one, because the most important reason actually is because when most people, and I was the same, if I think about lawyers, effectively it kind of went into three categories. There's the kind of like more activist lawyer who's kind of like representing sort of, people for good. And obviously there's the kind of barristers as well, but we're talking about kind of solicitors kind of type here thing here. Or then you've an activist one obviously includes organizations such as Client Earth who do amazing things, but they're very activist. They're kind of trying to effectively tell the system off for what it's doing wrong, which there is some things. Then there's obviously your kind of the sort of lawyers that work for in the kind of county town, and they're doing kind of wills, probates, and like business deals for the local SMEs and et cetera, and like divorce or whatever. And then obviously most people, when they think of a lawyer, is if it's not a barrister, it's a sharp suited suited and booted lawyer who works in a shiny offices and are paid very large wages. And actually, the interesting thing is that they are by far and away the most high-profile lawyers. So, the sort of lawyers you get things like back in the day, because I've already shown my age, when I was a fan of LA Law back in the 80s, and then latterly Suits. Those are the things that are kind of sexy.
Yeah.
What isn't sexy is in-house law. And that's partially because only about 20% of lawyers are actually working in-house, that are working for business. And once you realize about in-house lawyers, there's two things. One, all of the in-house teams, and actually so can the law firm lawyers as well. So that's the good news. There's lots of kind of legal things which they can be working with. So things from, say, like contract clauses. So contract clauses could have nothing in them about sustainability, or they could have actually really good stipulations in there about that. Could also be things to do with how you've set up certain policies and lots of different things. Then also, I know that one of the things that a key sort of tip for any lawyers that are out there that might be listening to this is that the Law Society has provided climate change guidance, which is excellent. And so I definitely recommend any lawyers who want to kind of lean into this going to the Law Society and looking for its climate change guidance, which has lots of things in about how you can be working with risk and the sort of things that there's a duty to warn that could be embedded into this, even down to things like how kind of like property deals, etc. Because of the risk of flooding, etc.
Yeah.
And so those are all the things that both the kind of all in-house lawyers and also private practice, the law firms, can do. But the real opportunity is actually with the General Counsel, the chief legal officers. And the reason why that is because through the conversations that I started having with those individuals when in 2021, when we started to kind of engage with that much more, was actually they are, first of all, senior corporate officers. So effectively, they're often on the C-suite, and sometimes they actually sit in both the executive board and the main board, because about half of general counsel are also the company secretary, so they get to sit in both. And because they're seen as kind of a wise head, whose their job is to horizon scan for things that might be coming at them, and crucially, nobody looks at a general counsel or a chief legal officer and thinks tree hugger.
Yeah.
So what it means is actually, if you've got a board meeting and there's one of the board members is known for being really kind of like pro-green, or in the executive board that you have like the sustainability director is invited to come and present.
Yeah.
What it means is that if somebody's kind of banging the drum for sustainability in these kind of like really elite meetings that are happening, if the GC is on board with sustainability, they can actually be adding to the sort of that momentum that is trying to be the drum that's trying to be beaten just by maybe one individual or two. So then you've got more bodies, but then actually it's goes far beyond that, because there's things where, because the general counsel is a sort of senior leader, and now they're increasingly being given other opportunities in sort of compliance and across various sort of related areas. That means some people who might be listening to this will know about the new European CSRD, and then there's like a Californian equivalent coming our way, and then there's loads of things happening. A lot of general counsel, and now the organization's going, wow, this is going to be difficult. We need somebody who's a safe pair of hands to help us steer through this. Yeah, you can do it, can't you? So it's the interesting thing is that there's both how they interact with both the kind of hard law and to some extent the more the softer law. So that's like, what the law is, but then also like contracts, etc. And then how they use their credibility and status, particularly the general counsel or the kind of ones that directly report into them, to kind of help move the dial regarding sustainability. Yeah.
So you mentioned compliance, and I was thinking when you were talking, is it about trying to expand this general counsel's minds from compliance with the laws as it is today, and look beyond compliance? What's the company going to have to do to be compliant in 10 years, 20 years time? Is that part of the conversation you've been having?
Yeah, definitely. So and it's actually been quite interesting because of the nature of the situation where they're getting so many compliance burdens put on them in the short term. And they're actually, all of them are being done with good intentions, like the Californian, the European, etc. And the challenge is it creates a lot of administration and a lot of box ticking. So one of the things and what we're seeing is increasing numbers of, especially the participants of our leadership exchange, which is a program that we run to support general counsel and chief legal officers, is that they're seeing that not only do they need to do good box ticking to make sure they're compliant, but also the key role that they can provide is as dot joiners. Yeah. So because they're the center of all this information that's coming in, and because lawyers are trained to be able to perceive where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are, and see how they can connect all of this. That's literally in their training. then you've got this opportunity for them actually to do what you were talking about, which is then they're not going to be able to deliver it. They've got to go to procurement, they've got to go to manufacturing, they've got to go to the marketing teams,
Yeah.
and to make sure that we're not greenwashing, or that we're helping drive the operational changes, etc., etc. And again, because it's coming from the legal team, what the advantage is that actually, whereas kind of just because it's just life, if a message comes from sustainability, people kind of go, oh, you're kind of paid to say that, that's your job. And it's like, well, I've got a business to run, don't you know?
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's fair, but that's right or wrong, it's just like how people think. It's like the society we live in. Whereas if the lawyer kind of perks up and says, yeah, and we're going to have maybe some serious greenwashing issues, and there's these regulators that are all over us, so we've got to be careful. People are like, oh, it's the General Counsel. Right, okay, we probably should do something about this. And so but effectively what we're looking for the General Counsel to do is to be, in a sense, but the chief ally to the sustainability team as well.
Yeah.
So then actually it kind of creates a virtuous cycle.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned greenwash, because I think it was last week, Oatly, the dairy alternative company, was successfully sued, it seems, by their investors for greenwashing. The settlement is apparently $9.3 million. So greenwash has suddenly become much more of a legal issue rather than a reputational issue. So it's interesting you pulled that one out.
Yes, absolutely. It's a big one. There's a number of big ones. The key big ones are kind of like how to deal with the kind of alphabet soup of regulations, which is kind of like almost a tsunami, it feels like, for many organizations hitting them. And then also things around greenwashing are massive. And those are both obviously things that are either directly or indirectly lapping at the shores of the legal teams.
Yeah. I think you mentioned this partially in your previous answers, but what would you say the biggest challenges are in engaging lawyers in sustainability?
Well, I think it's the biggest challenge for virtually anybody who is either in an organization which is absolutely part of its DNA, and there might be quite a lot of organizations say that it's part of their DNA, but then if you kind of like go into it, you see that it's important to the organization, but it's not part of the DNA. So I'm talking about, if you're talking about Patagonia, Patagonia, probably it's part of their DNA. But my guess is that they're literally, can almost count it on the fingers of two hands, the number globally that truly are like a Patagonia. And then, so if you're in an organization like that, great. But 99.9% of people aren't in organizations like that, and that's governments as well. Obviously, there is a few governments, possibly to some extent, one of the nation states of the UK, Wales, is actually on that journey as an example. And then also professionally, if you are working in sustainability, of course, it's part of your DNA, it's what you're doing, it's part of your job. And the thing is that in any society, and I don't mean just our modern society, I mean any society that's large and functioning, you have to have what we call siloization. So back in the day, you would have carpenters, and you'd have horsemiths, and you'd have the cooks and things like that. You'd have different people doing different jobs. Now, what's actually happened is we've gone on a grand scale. So now you've got people who can be as specialist as somebody who only ever works with like top level in-house lawyers on sustainability. I mean, how specialist is that? And obviously like zillions of other specialisms that we have. But what that means is actually in organizations, Because in an organization, to a certain extent, you're part of the organization, and there's things that's talked about, like how sustainability is part of our DNA, and then you see certain things that are being promoted externally and internally about how that is the case. So a lot of people think, well, we must be doing some good stuff there.
Yeah.
And all organizations are doing something, and many organizations are doing quite a bit. But as we know, you need to do a lot more, every organization. So then it's number one, most people don't know what to do. Don't know what actually the real situation is. But then also, it's not their job. So it's like, because if I went up to, say, the chief sustainability officer of a big corporate and said, okay, I need you to get passionate about data protection.
Yeah.
Because that's next door. Like, data protection it's protection, and we're protecting the planet, and it's like, can't you see the connections here?
Yeah.
Well, the chief head of sustainability is going to go, yes, it's not really my job. We've got people are doing that. The head of data privacy, that's you need to talk to them. Now, the thing is actually the way that sustainability has happened is that actually it's become a silo in many ways, even though it shouldn't be, and we all know that it effectively become a silo. So accepting there are some organizations which haven't done that, but that's how it's looked upon by most staff.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm saying all this is because actually it's not really about lawyers not being able to do it. It's about virtually everybody. And the reason why we, when we're setting up General Counsel Sustainability Forum, why we decided to focus on lawyers and then increasingly on in-house lawyers and then increasingly on the kind of top in-house lawyers was because actually the key thing is, and this is kind of the important thing, is that they've got the agency to be potentially able to do something. Yeah. So the thing that is the most important for anybody, and whether they're a lawyer or you're a dustbin man or you're a primary school teacher, is work out how you can build your agency. And when it comes down to it, that's part of the reason why I recognize that actually there's this big challenge with kind of the behavioral changes we currently promote.
Yes.
And that's because basically a lot of behavioral change promoted as things which are, do the recycling, switch lights off, or if you're feeling ambitious, put some insulation in and get a Tesla if you're rich, and, change your energy policy, energy provider. But the thing is if anybody does the kind of research, they kind of know it's kind of like calling it a rounding error is a vast exaggeration sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it feels as though I've got no agency here. Whereas, as I was sort of referring to the sort of people that are able to be sitting in the board meetings, the executive meetings, they have agency to be able to say things. And actually, many of our GCs have been working to do that. Unfortunately, some of that has been prompted by us. And what it is that everybody can have more agency than they realize. Yeah. So the thing is that, as people might have worked out by now, I'm not necessarily saying that they have done, but I have no legal experience, like none. Yeah. I didn't even do an O-level in it. I've not done any training at any shape or point. I've never done anything, nothing. Yeah. But what it was, because of my kind of life experience, I now look back on it, I had quite a lot of agency just at the right time.
Yeah.
Where I just went, you know what, there's an opportunity, and I reckon I can do something about this, and I'm going to give it a go. Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing is now I am like, because I've just kind of gone, right, I can do something. I'm being asked to speak at like really high profile legal conferences.
And you got a legal award?
And I got the legal award, which is delightful as well. Yeah, that was unexpected. So it's kind of like, so what it is that for anybody that is a lawyer that's listening, or is anybody that's just listening because they thought this might be interesting, actually, it's about thinking about where can you start to build your agency. But one of the things the one thing is, though, is it's all about baby steps. Again, one of the things is like, don't follow the kind of narrative that you should shoot for the stars straight away, because if not, you might hit the moon. It's actually the key thing is that it's working out how you build up Now, the thing is, part of the reason why I kind of told those long stories to a certain extent at the start was because I didn't just wake up one day and went, you know what, I'm going to work with the most elite in-house lawyers in the world, which is now I'm starting to do. It's actually been a 15-year journey to get here. And there's been a lot of like hard knocks over those last 15 years. Now, fortunately, the last 2 years or so, it's got a lot smoother because I kind of worked out how not to do it from the hard knocks that I got previously.
Yeah.
But it's like, but the thing is get going and do things.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying about agency, it's music to my ears because one of my basic principles is you have to align responsibility with authority. So we have this constant thing you find where, particularly in the days of environmental managers rather than sustainability managers doing their ISO 14001, and they would be trying to keep their bosses out of jail while sitting in this little silo with no authority to change anything. And even worse, I've seen quite large organizations say, okay, we're going to set these targets and then we're going to appoint voluntary sustainability champions to deliver them. And you go, but how? How are they going to do it? If these people are receptionists or, right on the front line, the most junior people, how are they going to change anything? So I think, and you did this, I'm paraphrasing what you said. It's a general principle that we have to engage with the people with agency to make change, whoever they are, whether they are lawyers, whether they're procurement managers, whether they're product designers, whoever's got their hands on the levers that can be pulled in a slightly different direction to deliver change, we've got to do it.
So yeah.
So that's my TED talk. So well, maybe this final question is a bit redundant then, given that we've agreed on that point. But if you want, what was the biggest lesson about sustainability you've learned across your career?
So yeah, it's a good question because it could be agency in a sense. It's about that's the hidden to a certain extent opportunity. But actually, I'll in a sense this is an obvious one, which even when I started out in 2006 working on this, I kind of knew. But what I've done is I've peeled back layers of learning around action. And the key thing is that if there's one takeaway that I've had, is that actually it is not about education. It is not about knowledge. It is not about learning. Those are all important. They're all valuable, but somewhat controversially potentially. If there's one thing that I've really learned is that they are not where you should start. You start at action. Get people doing things. Mm-hmm. So that's in our program, this leadership exchange that we do. Part of the reason why it works is because it's peer-to-peer. So it's a kind of a form of adapted, structured, guided small group coaching. What the thing is, though, that what we do is we get them straight away working on what action can you take. Now, a few of those GCs come in and they've already got quite a lot of experience. So we say, right, what's the next bigger thing you can be doing? That's a bit on the edge of your comfort zone. For many GCs that are coming in, they've got not that much experience around it. They're just like, I need to do something. And so it's like, and we actually literally have to pull them back down and say, right, okay, the actions you need, it's not about kind of like changing your organization overnight. It's about what are those baby steps. And we've written like a leader's growth guide to kind of like help them with that, with some other tips. It's about having a growth mindset. It's about grit and things like that. But what we've got is the key document that we offer them is our action principles, which is like there's 50 actions in there. And basically we say, right, pick 2 or 3 actions, then forget about the other 47, get on with starting to deliver some of those. And then what happens is you go from people like doing baby steps in kind of relatively small scale things to actually can be fairly quickly doing really powerful, impactful things. That's not because they believed that they could do that at the start. It's not because they learned how to do it. It's not because they went to their fantastic training course to do it. It's because they just started to create this virtuous cycle of action, which generates more action, which then eventually creates a belief, I can do this.
Yeah.
So that's the big takeaway. Action generates action.
Fantastic. So I think that's a brilliant place to finish, because I think that's a very, very important point to make. So thank you very much, Adam, for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure and wonderful to be asked. Thank you so much, Gareth.